Tom, when we talk about the committee and when we talk about the multiplicity of consciousness and our
Mhm.
different voices that are all jockeying for control
Yeah.
of what we
Yeah.
say and do,
Hmm.
how do those voices collaborate, interact with each other, and can they themselves develop a kind of codependency that we people have in our
Well,
relationships?
what I would say is, well, the short answer would be sure, because I really do believe that one of the most fascinating things about working with the intrapersonal landscape is that everything that we experience interpersonally, I always want to remind people that it's metaphor. So they're not really little people running around our minds. I mean, some people get a little. I mean, people do get kind of nervous about that if they come to therapy or they come into one of these groups and they go like, oh my God, I feel crazier now than I did before because, but more times than not, people feel more sane because they're basically being validated for what we actually experience. Because talking to ourselves is how we think. Having one thought, having a different opinion, interjecting. But if we're going to use this, if we're going to use the metaphor and think about codependency, I would say this authentic centerpiece, this decision maker that is me, that we are really working on becoming, that the one person in charge of all of the committee is the codependent by the time we show up for help. Is like, because if you think about what codependency means, what codependency, I mean, there's so many different ways of looking at codependency and defining it, but for our purposes, let's just say the simplest way is to say whatever you think of me determines how I feel about myself. Okay. In other words, and it's not even that. I mean, it's a little bit comical, but this is the truth. It's not even what and you and I've had enough conversations that I know you understand this part. It's not even what you think of me determines how I feel about myself. It's what I think you think of me that determines what, it's like I can sit there and I can make up a story by, the fact that you furrow your brow at a certain time and
Yeah,
decide,
I've
okay,
been
well,
there.
he's judging this. And if we're not checking that out with the people we're in conversation with, then we're off and running. But but let's just say what we're doing ultimately is handing our power over. I'm saying I'm without thinking of it in those terms, but unconsciously what I'm doing is saying what in this moment, well, I'm working on this with Patrick. I'm operating out of a system in which what Patrick thinks of me or what I think Patrick thinks of me is determining how I feel about myself. I'm not coming from the inside out. I'm coming from the outside in. And now, even and even let's say you actually have a thought that is judgmental or different from mine, that would be a problem for me. It's like, even with that, it's still my choice about whether I can take that into consideration. I actually think you and I do that in our conversations a lot, where we share honestly with each other about what we think we're doing with our work and stuff, and say, well, let me consider this, and I'll get back to you. It's like we can do that, but ultimately what we do with these inner voices is we give our power away. I mean, ultimately the easiest one would be to think about would be the should monster, some kind of negative condemning voice. And it's like, without ever even thinking about it, what we realize when somebody starts to talk about that is they'll say all these negative things about themselves. And then I will say, in therapy, I will say, okay, well, what do you think? And it's one of my favorite little things to do when I first meet somebody and they're saying these negative things about themselves. And they kind of look at me like, are you not paying attention? And I'm going like, no, I hear what that is, but what do you have do you have a different opinion? Do you have the same opinion? What do you think? And of course, what we're going to find is that the inner codependency is that we automatically accept and agree with the negative voice. I mean, we're very negatively biased against ourselves. Addiction, you and I are both recovering addicts. It's like codependency. It's like, it's not that I had a voice that said, well, at first it was, I was aware of my voice, which was, I need to drink, or I want to drink. We translate the problem into a relationship, so that now the problem is no longer that I want to drink. The problem is I have a part of me that says, Tom, you need to drink, or you want to drink now. And that's the alcoholism. And the problem now changes to not the fact that I have alcoholism, not that I have that part of me, and we can go back and include the should monster in there, the piece that says I'm a piece of shit. That's no longer the problem. The problem is I am there agreeing. I am automatically, that's the codependency. Tom, you need a drink. Okay. But that's unconscious. Tom, you're a piece of shit. I know. I'm actually in there the whole time, but I'm not saying anything. Problem definition is no longer that I have this issue. The problem is the relationship with the issue. I am not actually considering a possible separate opinion from that.
Right. The first step to disagreeing with these impulses that lead us astray is just to be conscious of that they're there, and of the kind of mechanism of how they're functioning.
Perfect. And the first thing you're going to be aware of is that we are all in the yes position. Tom, you're a piece of shit. I know it. Okay. Now people will say, well, that's progress. And go like, yeah, that's progress, because now you understand the different definition. The definition is my agreement, not the fact that I have a message in there, not that my history has taught me, or not that whether that be something I've come up with as a combination of all the things I've learned through my childhood, or whether that was my Uncle John that used to say that to me. It's still the fact that I need to find a place where I can see that I'm part of the problem. As you and I know through the program, we always have to find, okay, what's my part of the problem? And it's not just saying I am the problem. It's saying, no, my part of the problem is I'm agreeing with some stuff here that's very painful. Now, from the outside looking in, somebody else is going to look at it and say, well, it's also inaccurate. It's erroneous information. You're not a piece of shit, and no, you do not have to take a drink. But the idea is that from the very beginning, we don't know that. We just find ourselves in that yes position, and that's where we start.
If I had to guess, when you started to really kind of like integrate this work into your process of recovery, it probably came around the time you were doing a lot of work on your self-hate, right? I mean, I'm guessing it was present in the alcohol recovery, but then you said you're recovering, from the self-hate as well. And that's probably where you started to parse all these.
There's no doubt in my mind with hindsight that the first experience I had with separating and practicing what I'm describing was with my alcoholism. However, I didn't think of it in those terms. It's all in the 12-step program, for one thing. If you look at the language of the program, they actually differentiate the message from the person who has it. But I didn't actually get to the model of thinking about the separation of parts of ourselves until it was working with the should monster, the self-hatred.
I was just thinking about like my own alcoholism and how unaware I was really of like what those little men were doing. It wasn't until later, and it's actually like now it's like the work I'm doing with you guys.
We can apply the metaphor and use it as a practice going forward, but we can also take this metaphor and use it with hindsight and understand our recovery up to this point.